It was the gift of both my parents. Their ability to announce they said sorry without ever apologizing. "I said sorry," my father declared, to my perplexity. It was as if he was announcing he had done something he had not done, and in turn had done it because technically he was saying he was sorry by saying he had said he was sorry. It was a foggy day, and we were driving in his newest car for a self-declared broke man. He had claimed he was going to visit me the weekends before, but never did. Instead, leaving me to spend all day looking out a window excitedly for his non-arrival. That day, he suddenly appeared in front of our home to whisk me away to some magic pancake house and feed his drug-filled belly. It would be years before I knew it was not only addiction keeping him from making those visits, but that he had a secret 4 other wives and about 15 children, of which I now question if he even knows how many he had. Add on mistresses, and a penchant for stealing from his other wives and clients, and my father by all means was the face of extreme capitalism. "Gaw!" he yelped. "You did not listen," he scoffed. "I said sorry, Diandra." The interaction would be a repeated preview to the unfortunate dynamic I would have with many narcissists that would come into my life in the form of lovers, friends, family members, and even bosses. All of them treating me like I had no senses, like taste or touch or hearing, except when they conveniently needed my senses to get out of their own nonsense. He was an incredibly loud man that often spoke like a mobster, disappointed no one left the gun and took the cannoli. Yet my frustration was that he knew when to appear meek and quiet, particularly when he wanted to impress a stranger or scam them. Yet he had no desire for me. And that day he really just wanted a pancake. My father's ability to reroute and redirect was uncanny, and part of why so many men and women admired and even slept with him. He embodied toxic masculinity with such a grace that it felt genderless, a pure celebration of egomania. In a world where most of us feel like we have to apologize for existing and rebuild from the wreckage of being genuinely kind to the wrong person who looked like they would be reciprocal, there's something horribly attractive to the person who harms others and charms their way out of apologies, even to their own kid. Sure, that sounds sick, but it is. My father felt my coldness that day, and I quietly chewed my afternoon breakfast. He, like most men, associated food as a way to pacify the women in their life into submitting to their will or forgetting their toxic traits. It would be a constant reoccurrence in my own dating life. Men who believed buying me a dinner or a cocktail meant swift entrance into my heart, mind, body, and soul. What is worse is that they demanded a lot of entry in exchange for cheap meals. Within an hour, our daddy-daughter date was done. I was returned to my mother with a very poor Yelp review of my behavior, of which he would scold me for not being warmer. "You complain about him not coming, and then complain about him showing up," she chided. My mother was another one that refused to apologize to me for her wrongs, but by golly, could she swear I committed them. "Sorry I was not fun," I declared in a Wednesday Addams monotone as I walked away from both of them. To my father, I was a little bitch, which he would often call me. Yet there was something oddly freeing to not being easy and performative that day. I did not want to smile and thank him for mediocre pancakes on a Sunday. I did not want to praise him for showing up to be barely present. And I really wanted to sit in the complexity of wanting a father to show up and instead always getting that loser, Mr. H. It was as if I was manifesting wrong, asking the universe to bring me paternal love, and instead send me a whiny man devoid of it. Moreover, I was witnessing a lesson it would take me years to learn and accept. If someone hurts you, and their only complaint is that you said it, they don't love you. Looking up back, I wonder if that is my subconscious hindrance to manifesting love. Whenever I asked for it, I instead got someone who wanted me to love their hatefulness, accept and appreciate their cruelty, and call them wonderful. Yet no one ever said sorry to me for how they left my heart broken. They simply judged me for the days I did not mask it with false warmth. All right, let's heal. Let's discuss. So let's break this episode down. It may seem small, that pancake day, But I was remembering it and kind of tracing back. I think when you come from a traumatized, toxic childhood, you grow up to be an adult. You either grow up to be a horrible human being, like my father, or you grow up to be a human being that is consistently stepped on by horrible human beings, like my mother. And I was reading this guy who was talking about how people who overgive attract people who overtake. And that was the total dynamic of my father and mother. My mother was relentlessly generous with my father, and my father was always stealing everything: money, emotions, time, all of it. And the weird thing about narcissists, one of the reasons they struggle with their children becoming adults and maintaining a relationship is because of the question of reciprocity. And this kind of, you love your kids because they always show up for you, and they understand why you don't show up for them. Whether or not they do understand why you don't show up for them, or why you say you don't show up for them, they accept it. And this event happened like when I was like 7 or 8. I just remember I waited at least 6 weekends in a row for my dad to come. And my mother just didn't take me out that weekend because he was coming Saturday, then he was coming Sunday. And by Monday, the third day, we knew Jesus was not rising. And he just showed up. And I was so sick of the whole situation. And it's something that I noticed. I was watching The Valley because, that's where we all get our psych degrees, from reality TV. And the internet was ablaze because Jax's son cries whenever he arrives and doesn't want to be hugged by him, which is just not normal for a kid, because I always say it's a child's love that is truly unconditional. A parent's love could be, but it also could be conditional. And I was raised with very conditional parents. I had to perform. I couldn't just be with them. I had to perform for them. And depending on my performance was whether or not they loved me, they praised me, they gave to me, or they abused me. And he came and he took me to Pancakes, and I was I think you could tell I'm an exuberant personality. And I don't know that accent, where that's from. But I have a big personality. And I'm one of those people which frustrates me, that you could tell when something's wrong, or you can tell when I'm off. Like, there's no such thing as a quiet Diandra, or Haridin, as my artist name is. There's no such thing as, I'm just so apparent. So when I'm mad at you, you feel it. And even if I don't want you to feel it, And my parents never liked me mad at them. I had to love them even when they didn't love me. I had to praise them even when they didn't praise me. I had to hug them even when they didn't hug me. And that weekend, for some reason, I just was not having it. I didn't want to do the performance. You're such a great human being. Oh, you're broke. That's a nice new Escalade. I didn't want to do it, especially because my father was so loud and emotionally overwhelming and mentally fragile. Hanging out with him was like walking on glass. And even though there were shards on the floor, it didn't mean you would necessarily step on them, but the likelihood was pretty high. You're like on your toes trying to avoid them until you could finally find the broom and sweep it away. And that day I just wasn't sweeping it. I was quiet, and he was annoyed because the thing about being a charming person, particularly as a narcissist, is that, again, and this is why narcissists fail at having adult relationships, particularly with their kids, charm is just an illusion. It's the smoke in front of the mirror. And as we grow, we go in front of the mirror and we start to reflect and we see through the smoke. And that day the charm wasn't working on the little girl. And we went to the Pancakes, and I just was eating. And, my father demanded love, in part because he couldn't feel it. And I think, I told my friend, nobody looks at heaven quite like the devil. Like, he's just man, it's great up there, because it's something he will never be able to give and in turn never fully receive. So when people weren't performing for my dad, he just broke down because he didn't know. It was like the veil is up. Everybody sees that I'm a jerk and that I'm just trying to, buy with my charm or with my money that I stole from someone else, their love. And when they don't give it because I don't have a personality or I'm not funny and I'm not kind, I'm just a vacuum, I actually feel my own emptiness. And I swear, I don't think anybody chewed their pancakes. We took longer to get to the pancake house than actually eat them. We were back within an hour, and he gave my mother a very poor Yelp review of my restaurant behavior. And I really was just quiet. But my mother chiding me, you complain you want him to come, and you also complain that he shows up, is partially a little tall tale about our own dynamic that you're going to start seeing in future episodes of this. I don't think my parents, because they never made me their daughter, they made me everything else. Their villain, their protector, their emotional service animal. Because they never made me their daughter. They didn't actually understand that they were my mother and father, that I wanted them as parents. I wanted that unconditional love and that unconditional bonding and that endless conversation and that sweetness and that presence. There was always something else, another family or another addiction or another thievery in the case of my dad, and in the case of my mom, another pain, another person she was trying to people please, another illness, another job, there was just something always in the way for them being present and connecting with me. And they didn't understand, of course, I wanted them to show up. I'm a kid and I only have one mother and one father. They thought I was just this weird, confused entity that was trying to manipulate them or trying to play with their feelings. And they didn't understand. I think it takes a long time. We're all just, it's like that saying, we're all just, adults are just children in grown bodies. I base that in recovery off of this concept that adulthood is just one giant response to your childhood and these developing years and how they affect once you're fully developed. And I've often given people titles they didn't deserve: boyfriend, best friend, boss. And when they didn't show up for me or weren't kind to me, I accepted it because I was attached to the title. I wasn't attached to the person holding it. And it was because of this dynamic my parents had that I think they convinced themselves because I wanted them that they were good. Because that's just logic. People, if you want something, don't you want it because it's good? Do you want that chocolate cake because it's sweet? You want a best friend because it would be fun. There's just certain things that are logical, but toxic relationships are built upon this irrational, I want a boyfriend. And even though this guy completely mistreats me, uses me, never shows up for me, he's my boyfriend. And I'm going to make all those red flags that I saw by the third date work for the next 3 years until we have a terrible breakup and he decides to gossip about me and act like I never existed or gave him anything. # John Mulaney syndrome. And I got chided and I went upstairs and I just said, sorry I wasn't fun, very Wednesday Addams. And it's this weird kind of trauma victory you have. Every time I have a boundary, or I say no, or I just don't perform, I get really proud of me. Because part of my periods of social isolation, part of my instances where I just can't show up, is because I was never taught to just be. I had to perform. I had to make sure everybody felt good and felt good about making them feel good. And if I didn't feel good about making them feel good, then I was being bad. And that day, I just didn't mind being bad, even though I wasn't. But seeing even my mother forget that for 6 weeks I was by that window, waiting for him, excitedly. There was just no compassion for me in that situation. And that day I was a bad girl because I wasn't compassionate for the adults. And it sucked. It just absolutely